Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Om Jnana Tiramandasya Ganandana Shalakaya Chakshurun Minitamyena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Hare Krishna. We are continuing our Saturday study of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And right now we're on the Adi Lila, Chapter 9. The title is The Desire Tree of Devotional Service. And last week started on texts 13 through 15, and it's a discussion of the roots of the bhakti tree. And I believe that he left off with Paramananda Puri. And so I'm just going to reread the translation so we know where we're at. So this is text 13 through 15. Paramananda Puri, Keshava Bharati, Brahmananda Puri, and Brahmananda Bharati, Sri Vishnu Puri, Keshava Puri, Krishnananda Puri, Sri Nrsinga Tirtha, and Sukhananda Puri. These 9 sannyasi roots all sprouted from the trunk of the tree. Thus the tree stood steadfastly on the strength of these 9 roots. Purport. Paramananda Puri belonged to a Brahmana family of the Trihut district in Uttara Pradesh. Madhavendra Puri was his spiritual master. So he discussed about that last week. In relationship with Madhavendra Puri, Paramananda Puri was very dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And among his sannyasi disciples, Ishvara Puri and Paramananda Puri were very dear to Madhavendra Puri. Thus, Paramananda Puri, like Swarup Damodar, who was also a sannyasi, was very dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and was his constant associate. When Lord Chaitanya accepted the renounced order, Paramananda Puri offered him the danda. Paramananda Puri was always engaged in meditation, and Sri Swarup was always engaged in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered full respect to his spiritual master, Ishvara Puri, he similarly respected Paramananda Puri and Swarup Damodar. It is described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat Antya Kanda, Chapter 3, that when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first saw Paramananda Puri, he made the following statement. Aji Danya Lochana Sapala Aji Janma Sapala Aji Haila Sarvadama Prabhu Aji Mora Sapala Sanyasa Aji Madhavendra More Prakasha. My eyes, my mind, my religious activities, and my acceptance of the sannyas order have now all become perfect because today Madhavendra Puri is manifest before me in the form of Paramananda Puri. The Chaitanya Bhagavat further states, Katokshane anyonye karena pranama Paramananda Puri Chaitanyera Priyadama. Thus Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exchanged respectful obeisances with Paramananda Puri, who was very dear to him. Paramananda Puri established a small monastery behind the western side of the Jagannath temple where he had a well dug to supply water. The water, however, was bitter, and therefore Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prayed to Lord Jagannath to allow Ganges water to come up into the well to make it sweet. When Lord Jagannath granted the request, Lord Chaitanya told all the devotees that from that day hence, the water of Paramananda Puri's well should be celebrated as Ganges water, for any devotee who would drink it or bathe in it would certainly get the same benefit as that derived from drinking or bathing in the waters of the Ganges. such a person would certainly develop pure love of Godhead. It is stated in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antya 3:2-5, Prabhu Vitivite Nishchai Chanhiya Pure Goshanira Prite. I am living in this world only on account of the excellent behavior of Sri Paramananda Puri. The Goloka states, Sri Paramanando Yadashirudavara Pura. Paramananda Puri is none other than Uddhava. Uddhava was Lord Krishna's friend and cousin, and in Chaitanya became the friend of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his relationship in the disciple. So, as we've heard before, and we'll continue to read, all of Krishna's associates descended with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to support his mission at the time. And the next sannyasi that is discussed is Keshava Bharati. Keshava Bharati, the Saraswati Bharati, and Puri Sampradayas belong to the Sringeri Math in South India, and Sri Keshava Bharati, who at that time was situated in a monastery in Katwa, belonged to the Bharati Sampradaya. According to some authoritative opinions, although Keshava Bharati belonged to the Shankara Sampradaya, he had formerly been initiated by a Vaishnava. He is said to have been a Vaishnava on account of having been initiated by Madhavendra Puri, for some say that he took sannyas from Madhavendra Puri. The temple and deity worship started by Keshava Bharati are still existing in the village known as Katundi, which is under the postal jurisdiction of Kandara in the district of Burdwan. According to the managers of that mat, the priests are descendants of Keshava Bharati, and some say that the worshippers of the deities are descendants of the sons of Keshava Bharati. In his householder life he had two sons, Nishapati and Ushapati, and a Brahmana of the name Sri Nakadinchandra Vidyaratna, who was a member of the family of Nishapati, was the priest in charge at the time that Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati visited this temple. According to some, the priests of the temple belonged to the family of Keshava Bharati's brother. Still another opinion is that they descend from Madhava Bharati, who was another disciple of Keshava Bharati. Madhava Bharati's disciple Balabhadra, who also later became a sannyasi of the Bharati Sampradaya, had two sons in his family life named Madan and Gopal. Madana, whose family surname was Bharati, lived in the village of Auriya, and Gopal, whose family surname was Brahmachari, lived in the village of Denduda. There are still many living descendants of both families. In the Gauda Ganudesh Dipika 52, it is said, Mathurayam Yagna Sutram Pura Krishnaya Yomuni Dado Sandipani Sobodadya Keshava Bharati. Sandipani Muni, who formerly offered the sacred thread to Krishna and Balaram, later became Keshava Bharati. It is he who offered sannyas to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There is another statement about Keshava Bharati from the Gaura Ganudesh Dipika. Iti kechit prabhasante krura Keshava Bharati. According to some authoritative opinions, Keshava Bharati is an incarnation of Akrura. Keshava Bharati offered the sannyas order to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the year 1432 Sakabda, which is AD 1510, in Katwa. This is stated in the Vaishnava Manjusha, Part 2. And it's interesting here because Prabhupada actually didn't mention the fact that as far as we've read and heard, that Keshava Bharati was actually a Mayavad sannyasi. He is said here in this purport that he was initiated by Madhavendra Puri, and he took sannyas from Madhavendra Puri. But when we read about when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, he's actually thought to have taken sannyas from a Mayavad sannyasi. So there's differing accounts, and when also it's discussed that he's either Sandipani Muni or Akrura or somehow both in incarnation. We can understand that it's just the pastimes. It's the pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When he took sannyas from a Mayavad sannyasi, he took sannyas because he didn't feel he was going to be listened to, or no one would take him seriously. So he thought he would have to take sannyas from somebody, and just so happened that somebody was Keshava Bharati, who happened to be Sandipani Muni. That makes sense. And if it's said that he took from a Mayavad sannyasi, and then he himself, Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya himself is a Vaishnava, then it, anybody can be turned. So it stands to reason that, of course, that was a pastime that he could sort of turn everything around to from the Mayavad philosophy to Vaishnavism, to Gaudiya Vaishnava, being a Gaudiya Vaishnava. And it was also interesting that with the name Bharati, that automatically connotates that he was part of the Shankara Sampradaya, but he had formerly been initiated by a Vaishnava. So, and it's said here that he's one of the 9 roots of the Bhakti tree. So he's obviously in the Gaudiya Vaishnava camp. So this seems pretty clear from this standpoint that he's certainly a Vaishnava. Even though maybe at the time he had put up that little bit of sort of a yoga maya, so everybody could think he was a Mayavad philosopher at the time. But he's here as one of the roots of the Bhakti tree, one of the 9 sannyasis of the roots of the Bhakti tree. So we must certainly appreciate him from that perspective. And next is Brahmananda Puri. Sri Brahmananda Puri was one of the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu while he was performing kirtan in Navadvip, and he also joined Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri. We may note in this connection that the name Brahmananda is accepted not only by Mayavad sannyasis, but by Vaishnava sannyasis also. One of our foolish godbrothers criticized our sannyasi, Brahmananda Swami, saying that this was a Mayavad name. The foolish man did not know that Brahmananda does not always refer to the impersonal Brahman. Parabrahman, the supreme Brahman, is Krishna. The devotee of Krishna can therefore also be called Brahmananda. This is evident from the fact that Brahmananda Puri was one of the chief sannyasi associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's interesting because also there was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada named Brahmananda. So he pretty much squelched that, thinking that it was a Mayavadi name. Brahmananda Bharati went to see Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Dham. At that time, he used to wear only a deerskin to cover himself, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indirectly indicated that he did not like this deerskin covering. Brahmananda Bharati therefore gave it up and accepted a loincloth of saffron color as used by Vaishnava sannyasis. For some time, he lived with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Puri. So we can understand from all of these, the dealings of Lord Chaitanya with all these sannyasi associates, that he was turning them all away from, even if they had a tinge of Mayavad thinking, he was trying to turn them all away and turn everybody's thinking in general away from that conception of the Mayavad philosophy, because it was pretty rampant at the time. So his main focus, especially when establishing the roots of the Bhakti tree, was to try his best to make everyone understand that the Vaishnavism is the main path. The bhakti path is the main path. That's the path that we should all be, that everybody, whoever's interested in spiritual life should be subscribing to, not, the voidism of Maya philosophy. So those were all, except for Paramananda Puri, those were all little bits that came up that he was able to squelch quite easily, obviously, and for our benefit too, so we can understand that, things, little things. It's just even little things that I've heard and I've read that, and you can see it in today's society. It's those little. There's so many little chinks that, if you think about someone's faith in the Lord, and if there's little tiny chinks in that faith, over time it's going to become a little bit more consumed. The whole thing is just it's going to eat away at the whole. So these little tiny chinks of, a deerskin covering or someone's name, or, maybe some speak at the time of Mayavad philosophy, over time it tends to wear down the great faith of the God-fearing persons, and I would venture to say that that's happened a lot in our modern society, because when it comes to things like, in fact, I just was reading something about a scientist. I think he was in Australia, and he was talking about, everything's about corona, and he was talking about how this coronavirus, there's no way that it could not have been engineered by humans, because the virus is so incredibly adaptable to all of the parts and pieces of the inner workings of the human species, that there's no way it could have been something that animals had, that people would have had to have engineered it for it to be this perfect. But something like that stands to reason. Why would he even think that something that human beings engineer would be perfect? I mean, it's ridiculous, actually. But that's what those are like. So one of a million other things that is purported to try to take away the existence of a supreme being or absolute authority or greater power than human beings, because people don't want to believe that, and they don't want to be held accountable to a higher power. Sorry. Madhya Mula Paramananda Puri Mahadira Ashtadike Ashtamula Vriksha Kaila Stira. With the sober and grave Paramananda Puri as the central root, and the other 8 roots in the 8 directions, the tree of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stood firmly. Skandera upare bahu shaka ubala jila upari shaka sankhya haila. From the trunk grew many branches, and above them innumerable others. Visha saka kari eka eka mandala maha saka chaila brahmananda sakala. Thus the branches of the Chaitanya tree formed a cluster or society with great branches covering all the universe. Brahmanda, the whole universe. And then the purport to this is, Prabhupada says, our International Society for Krishna Consciousness is one of the branches of the Chaitanya tree. Haribol. I mean, Lord, Srila Prabhupada came here pretty much on the order of Chaitanya to spread, even in his pranam mantra, to take away the voidism in the Western worlds. So he spread the seed devotional service and spread the Mahamantra. Ekaika shahati upashaka sata sata yata upajilasaka ke gani bekata. From each branch grew many hundreds of sub-branches. No one can count how many branches thus grew. Mukya mukya sakaganera namaganana ageta kariba shuna vrikshera varnana. I shall try to name the foremost of the innumerable branches. Please hear the description of the Chaitanya tree. This is such a wonderful visual, this whole bhakti tree, when you think about all the personalities and just branching everywhere, and it's still growing. You know, it's growing every day by Srila Prabhupada's mercy and the mercy of the Vaishnavas who are trying their best to spread it all around the world. Rikshera upare shaka haila dui skanda ekadvaita namara nityananda. At the top of the tree, the trunk branched into two. One trunk was named Sri Advaita Prabhu, and the other Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Jai. Se dui skande bahu saka upajila tara upashaka gane jagat chaila. From these two trunks grew many branches and sub-branches that covered the entire world. Barashaka upashaka tara upashaka yata upajila tara ke karibeleka. These branches and sub-branches and their sub-branches became so numerous that no one can actually write about them. And we actually see that today. We hear so many stories, and I read stories pretty regularly about maybe someone in some country that got a book, and a very memorable story was the airline stewardess that had taken some remnants from Srila Prabhupada one time when he was, I think, going through South America. And later on, someone was distributing books, you know, many years later actually, and they came upon someone's house and knocked on the door, and there was an older lady, and she invited the book distributor in, and the book distributor was astounded to see, you know, so many books and pictures, and this woman was a devotee that no one knew about, because that one moments of association, many years before with Srila Prabhupada, afforded her the opportunity to just started her seated devotion. And I've read a lot of stories about that since then, just with not associating with Srila Prabhupada, but who've gotten a book, or recently I had read a story about someone who was worshiping Jesus, and then they were asking a really huge picture. I guess it was like a 8-foot picture of Jesus they had in the house to send them information about God. And then a book distributor knocked on this person's door, and they were invited in by the person, by the resident. And they came in and saw this huge picture of Jesus, and the resident said, "I've been praying to Jesus, and you've come, and now I can finally understand more about God." So this happens all the time, actually. This bhakti tree's growing little roots and sprouts all the time, because Lord Chaitanya started it to encompass the world, and Srila Prabhupada is his agent. I think personally has done a unbelievable job to with books and just his will to spread it around. Sishya pratishya are upashisha gana jagat vyopila taranakika ganana. Thus the disciples and the grand disciples and their admirers spread throughout the entire world, and it is not possible to enumerate them all. Udambara vrikshayena pale sarvange mata bhakti vrikshe sarvatra palalage. As a big fig tree bears fruits all over its body, each part of the tree of devotional service bore fruit. This is a really nice purport. This tree of devotional service is not of this material world. It grows in the spiritual world, where there is no distinction between one part of the body and another. It is something like a tree of sugar, for whichever part of such a tree one tastes, it is always sweet. The tree of bhakti has varieties of branches, leaves, and fruits, but they are all meant for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are 9 different processes of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dashyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. But all of them are meant only for the service of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, whether one hears, chants, remembers, or worships, his activities will yield the same result. Which one of these processes will be the most suitable for a particular devotee depends upon his taste. And this is just such an interesting point, because I think about this quite a lot, the 9 different processes of devotional service. And there's so many depictions in the Srimad Bhagavatam of different personalities who have sought Krishna by different means of devotional service. Whether it was, Dhruva meditating in the forest, or, of course, the gopis picking flowers for Krishna. I mean, there's just so many different ways that, to seek Krishna's, to serve Krishna and seek his, try to seek his, being pleasure, having, us giving him pleasure, them giving him pleasure. And we can see this here, too, with different individuals who are practicing on the bhakti path, what things that really, are good for them to do, and also they are good at doing. And sometimes I've noticed that maybe, if you try to fit a square peg in a round hole, that frustrates the person that is doing the service. It also, maybe Krishna may or may not be pleased. I'm sure he's pleased with the endeavor, but as he said in the Bhagavad Gita, we should do our duties. We shouldn't try to do things that really aren't what our nature is. Don't do things artificially. So whether we're hearing, and, there's so many of these that are so easy to remember Krishna with hearing and chanting, and particularly, personally remembering. Because even if, I'm physically unable to do what I would like to be doing, then you can always remember Krishna. You can always offer service in your mind. And many times if, I can't make some elaborate bhoga offering because I don't have ingredients or whatever. You try your best, and Krishna, supplies the rest. So the point is your intention is to give him the best and please him as far as possible with whatever, you can dream up, even if it's not in front of your, in front of your purview that you can actually do things with. So it's just a really interesting point that Prabhupada says what's the most suitable for a particular devotee depends on his taste. And everybody's different, so everybody's going to have some blend of what works for them the best. Recently, someone said that they didn't think that their skill set was going to be dressing the deities. And maybe not, but there's other things you can do for Krishna. And, personally, I happen to particularly like dressing the deities. I don't know if I'm very good at it, but, at least I'm trying. So the intention and the attempts are the most important thing, and within your nature, within your, hopefully, the skill set. And if it's not, Krishna certainly will show you that that's not your what you should be doing, and point you in different direction. So text 26. Mula skandira shakara upashaka gane lagila ye prema phala amrita ke jine. Since Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the original trunk, the taste of the fruits that grew on the branches and sub-branches surpassed the taste of nectar. Pakila ye prema pala amrita madura vilaya chaitanya mali nahilaya mula. The fruits ripened and became sweet and nectarian. The gardener, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, distributed them without asking any price. And that's the beauty of this Sankirtan movement. There's no rules for taking it, it's all for free. And it's really, I don't know, I find it really a little frustrating, but, certainly sad when people are given a piece of fruit from this bhakti tree and they just refuse it. They just refuse it. They don't want anything sweet. They just want to continue to suffer. So what to do? Just keep trying and praying. Tri jagate yata chetana ratnamani eka valera mulya karitaha nahi gani. All the wealth in the three worlds cannot equal the value of one such nectarian fruit of devotional service. And now in the world, there's so much, of course, the three gates to hell are lust, anger, and greed, but there's so much, you see it, just so much greed and, being so fixated on capitalism and economy and just, that everything's running on that. The whole world's just running on a good economy instead of having this wonderful fruit of devotional service that people can focus on. And of course people that really they don't know what it is, and they don't want to take anything that they don't know about. But sometimes you can find somebody that's really ripe to give that fruit out to, and hopefully we can all increase that as we get further and further into Kali Yuga, because there's so many books on people's shelves that have been received, and they're all little time bombs. And hopefully, I'm praying every day that as people are staying at home, they just sort of look at a bookshelf and they figure out, that they need to read it, or somehow or other they're curious about it, or they're remember that interaction with the devotee, which is really important, and then they take the book down and they just even hold the book. So, or somehow on the internet they get word of Bhakti Yoga, and that seems to be becoming more prominent now with so many people on the internet. And there's some high-profile individuals that are, creating music and doing other things to bring attention to Bhakti Yoga. So hopefully, little by little, I'm very hopeful that people will, instead of wanting to amass wealth, will ask for a piece of nectarian fruit of devotional service. Mage vana mage keha patra va patra ihara vichara nahi jane deya matra. Not considering who asked for it and who did not, nor who was fit and who unfit to receive it, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu distributed the fruit of devotional service. And here's the purport. This is the sum and substance of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. There is no distinction made between those who are fit and those who are not fit to hear or take part in the Sankirtan movement. It should be therefore preached without discrimination. The only purpose of the preachers of the Sankirtan movement must be to go on preaching without restriction. That is the way in which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced this Sankirtan movement to the world. I did hear the other day, a few times by a particular sannyasi that says, basically, if you can't force it on anyone, and I think in the past there might be a way to sort of by hook or by crook to have them hear the holy names, somehow, or have them take prasadam somehow. But if they're not willing, and actually maybe you can elaborate because I'm curious about this, if they're not willing to sort of be open to that suggestion, if it's not their intention, if it's an unintentional hearing, or if it's like a sort of just a, like not forced, but sort of forced upon them where they didn't really want it, then it doesn't have the same effect. Actually, it doesn't have the same potency, and they won't, maybe in some faraway lifetime, they would have to take it up if they hear the Maha Mantra, but it wouldn't have the same effect as when somebody intentionally is seeking, that kind of path, intentionally seeking. Is that the understanding? Okay. Mm. Right. Yeah. Mm. 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 It's far and wide. Yeah. Mm. Create their good fortune. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And the crow took it. Yeah. Yeah. Knocked out. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. Okay. So I suppose, yeah, and that's real. And I guess devotees too would have to be really extra ordinarily careful to present Krishna consciousness in a nice and relishable way. Um, and as Prabhupada says, the only purpose of the preachers of the Sankirtan movement must be to go on preaching without restriction. So without any restriction, and in a very uh, wonderful way, to make it relishable to so many suffering souls. I mean, there's just so many in the world that just absolutely need it, whether they think they do or not, or whether they're intending to find another path or not. Um, and that's the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he distributed, not considering who asked for it and who did not, nor who was fit or unfit. So, I mean, who's actually fit, I mean, he's distributing it to so many of us that are, I mean, speaking for myself, of the lowest caste. So there's a lot of unfits. And thankfully, Srila Prabhupada was kind enough to bring it here to distribute it to the West. Anjali Anjali Bari Vele Chaturdishe Daridra Gudana Kaya Malakara Hase. The Transcendental Gardener, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, distributed handful after handful of fruit in all directions, and when the poor, hungry people ate the fruit, the gardener smiled with great pleasure. And of course, purity is the force. There's, of course, we've read about when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go from town to town, and people, whole towns would become devotees because just seeing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and seeing the kirtan, hearing the kirtan, seeing the dancing of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they couldn't help but to take up bhakti yoga and chant also and dance, which is the primary thing, chanting and dancing. So they couldn't help it. So purity certainly is the force when we're attempting to share this beautiful bhakti yoga gift with others. Malakara kahe shuna vriksha parivara mula shaka upashaka yateka prakara. Lord Chaitanya thus addressed the multifarious varieties of branches and sub-branches of the tree of devotional service. Alaukika vrikshakare sarvendriya karma stavara haya dare jangamera dharma. Since the tree of devotional service is transcendental, every one of its parts can perform the action of all the others. Although a tree is supposed to be immovable, this tree nevertheless moves. It is our experience in the material world that trees stand in one place, but in the spiritual world, a tree can go from one place to another. Therefore, everything in the spiritual world is called alaukika, uncommon or transcendental. Another feature of such a tree is that it can act universally. In the material world, the roots of a tree go deep within the earth to gather food. But in the spiritual world, twigs, branches, and leaves of the upper portion of the tree can act like the roots, sort of like a banyan tree. Evrikshera angahaya sabasha chetana badiya vyapila sabe sakala bhuvana. All the parts of this tree are spiritually cognizant, and thus as they grow, they spread all over the world. Ekala malakara mikahan kahan yaba ekala vakata falapadiya vilaba. I am only the gardener. How many places can I go? How many fruits can I pick and distribute? Here, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indicates that the distribution of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra should be performed by combined forces. Although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he laments, how can I act alone? How can I alone pick the fruit and distribute it all over the world? This indicates that all classes of devotees should combine to distribute the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra without consideration of the time, place, and situation. So there's the purport of the past several texts, and this is the point of the Bhakti tree, as tended to nicely by the Supreme Gardener, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is to distribute the fruits. The fruits are the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and that's the most important thing that we can do in this day and age, because even if people won't take prasadam or they won't take a book, they'll hear the Maha Mantra, and there's so many ways to induce them to chant. There's so many ways, and usually people are not very averse to that, much less so than taking a book. So even if we distribute the Maha Mantra everywhere far and wide, we can also be little sub-agents of this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Bhakti cult. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai.